pregnant wife has to face Dr. Alone millionaire husband's absence with Mistress causes heartbreak. Confidence can be a fragile illusion. Stella Hathaway learned this the day her hopes for a fairy tale marriage shattered like broken glass beneath designer shoes. She never expected to feel such a jarring combination of terror and heartbreak, especially not in a bustling corridor of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center while poised on the brink of delivering her first child. Her husband, Everett Langford, a millionaire dripping with charm and influence, should have been by her side, but his seat was cold and empty. That night, Stella discovered betrayal can strike in the most vulnerable moments, and heartbreak can be born in the same instant as new life. Stella Hathaway was born in a sleepy New England town that boasted more trees than people. She grew up believing in the power of compassion, kindness, and, above all, love. Her parents, Susan and Robert Hathaway, ran a modest bookstore on the main street, a cozy place that filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and well-worn paperbacks. Her childhood was comfortable not in the sense of excessive wealth, but in the sense of stability, warmth, and unconditional support. She inherited her mother's inquisitive mind and her father's soft heart. Sunday afternoons were for volunteering at the local animal shelter, and her parents encouraged her to approach life with empathy. She learned early that real contentment didn't come from extravagant possessions, but from shared laughter, a feeling of belonging, and seeing the difference one person could make in someone else's life. In her late teens, Stella earned a partial scholarship to a reputable liberal arts college. She majored in English literature, enthralled by stories of heroines who dared to follow their hearts despite impossible odds. Little did she know that she, too, would be tested by life's storms in a tale that would rival the drama of her favorite novels. When Stella moved to New York after graduation, bright-eyed and full of dreams, she planned to find a modest editing job, make a home in a charming little apartment, and perhaps meet someone who loved her for her generous spirit. She never expected to cross paths with Everett Langford, a charismatic millionaire who dazzled crowds with his confident stride and seemingly bottomless pockets. Their meeting would sweep her into a world she had never imagined, a realm of wealth, power, and heartbreak that tore at her beliefs, forcing her to confront what love meant when tested by lies. Stella first encountered Everett Langford at an upscale charity event hosted at the famed Waldorf Astoria in Manhattan. She had been invited by an old college friend, Marianne, who volunteered at an organization that provided scholarships to underprivileged youth. The event's grandeur overwhelmed Stella from the moment she entered the lobby. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and marble floors mirrored the glittering evening gowns and tailored tuxedos of high society. She clutched a simple black clutch against her modest navy dress, trying to blend in. She noticed Everett immediately. He wore a bespoke Armani suit and had a Rolex watch that caught the overhead lights with every subtle shift of his arm. He stood conversing with New York's elite, yet managed to look supremely at ease. Unlike many of the older benefactors around him, he seemed youthful, with a confident grin that revealed charming dimples. Introductions were made. When Marianne introduced Stella to Everett, his gaze lingered on her for a heartbeat longer than politeness required. "Stella Hathaway," he said in a smooth baritone. "That's a lovely name." Rolls off the tongue, his flattery made her blush. She was not used to such direct attention from a man so clearly in command of the room. As they talked about the scholarship program, he asked about her career, her dreams, and even listened with interest when she described her fondness for volunteer work. It was refreshing, even disarming, to find a wealthy man who seemed truly interested in philanthropic efforts, not just in signing checks for tax breaks. By the evening's end, he slipped her his business card, a bold move that hinted at more than just professional curiosity. Stella, slightly giddy, slid the card into her clutch without knowing that this small rectangle of embossed cardstock would change her life forever. Everett didn't waste time. He called Stella within a day, inviting her for coffee at a cafe near Central Park. Cliché or not, she accepted. The next morning, she found herself seated across from him at a small wooden table, sipping cappuccino while the green expanse of the park loomed behind them through floor-to-ceiling windows. He asked about her work editing manuscripts for a small publishing house. He teased her about the ink smudges on her fingertips and the permanent indentation on her right shoulder from carrying too many books. She laughed, surprised by how easily conversation flowed between them. In turn, he spoke about his inheritance, Langford Enterprises, a suite of luxury hotels and commercial properties that his family had run for decades. He explained that he was expected to expand the empire, forge new alliances, and secure the family's name for future generations. Yet for all this talk of business, Stella sensed an undercurrent of loneliness in him. She couldn't pinpoint it, but saw it flicker in his eyes when he paused to reflect, as if he carried an unspoken burden. Perhaps it was the expectation of his family legacy or the stifling social scene that demanded a certain image from him. Before they parted, Everett placed a gentle hand on Stella's wrist and asked if he could see her again. She found herself smiling, nodding, and once more feeling that pleasant rush of excitement. Their courtship was swift and passionate. He took her on whirlwind tours of his favorite art galleries, introduced her to five-star dining, and whisked her off to weekend getaways in upstate New York. Stella often felt out of place in the realm of luxurious indulgences, yet Everett assured her that he admired her sincerity. "Don't ever change," he would say, his eyes locked on hers, "because your heart is what makes you special." Within a year, Everett proposed to Stella in an ostentatious display that made headlines in local society columns. He arranged for a private dinner at Bryant Park, complete with a string quartet and a small fireworks show that lit up the evening sky. As the final fireworks sparkled, he knelt on one knee, opened a velvet box, and revealed a cushion-cut diamond ring so large that Stella's breath caught in her throat. She said yes, tears of joy shining in her eyes. For a moment, she believed she had walked into a fairy tale, where love conquered all differences, where sincerity and fortune lived in harmony. The wedding itself was a lavish affair at the Langford Regent Hotel, one of the family's most prestigious properties. Stella's simple tastes were eclipsed by Everett's desire to impress. Flower arrangements draped every corner of the grand ballroom. The tables were adorned with gold-trimmed linens, and each course of the wedding dinner had been meticulously paired with rare wines. High society luminaries attended, mingling with a few of Stella's closest friends and family who looked around in wide-eyed astonishment. Yet, behind the shimmering facade, Stella felt a faint tremor of unease. Perhaps it was the pitying glance from an elderly aunt who whispered that she hoped Stella could handle Everett's restless ways. Perhaps it was the slight tension in Everett's shoulders whenever his father approached to deliver stern reminders about upholding the family name. Or perhaps it was the pre-nuptial agreement thrust into Stella's hands mere days before the ceremony, an agreement that even her father gently urged her to reconsider. She had not grown up with wealth, and the legal jargon confused her, leaving her anxious. But she believed in Everett, his kindness, his excitement about sharing a future with her, and so she signed, trusting that she'd never need to understand the intricacies of that thick legal document. After the wedding, Stella moved into the Langford family estate. It was more a fortress than a home, sprawled across acres of landscaped gardens, hidden behind tall iron gates that opened only with a special security code. The estate included a golf course, a horse stable, and a labyrinthine hedge maze that Stella found both enchanting and eerie. She tried to make the mansion feel like home, placing framed photographs of her family on the mantel, adding a reading nook in a quiet corner, and insisting that the staff not treat her like royalty. Yet, she found herself overwhelmed by the army of maids, chefs, and gardeners who bustled around from dawn to dusk. She felt a pang of guilt whenever a maid rushed forward to pick up something she dropped, or a chef insisted on cooking lavish meals she didn't request. Everett, for his part, seemed busier than ever. He jetted around, finalizing expansions of Langford enterprises in foreign markets. When he was home, he was charming, sprinkling their conversation with talk of the future vacations in Europe, philanthropic galas, and eventually children. Stella clung to those fleeting moments, though a disquieting feeling arose whenever she tried to discuss more personal matters. Sometimes she thought, why does this mansion feel empty, despite so many people? The staff always spoke to her politely, but their eyes flickered with caution, as though mindful that a misstep could cost them their livelihoods. The lavish furnishings, with gilded mirrors and priceless artwork, reminded her of a museum rather than a cozy dwelling. Still, Stella believed in the power of small acts of warmth. She organized staff luncheons where she personally thanked each housekeeper, cook, and gardener. She began volunteering at a nearby children's hospital, continuing her personal mission of compassion. Whenever she told Everett about these volunteer sessions, he'd nod absently, offering half-hearted statements like, "Yes, that's good for our public image. Keep it up." Despite his detachment, Stella pressed on, hoping their bond would deepen over time. After all, no relationship was perfect. She had grown up in a loving, but by no means flawless, home and believed that every marriage required patience, sacrifice, and unwavering faith. One day, Stella felt the first sign something was amiss. She had spent hours preparing a dinner for Everett's homecoming roast chicken with fresh herbs from the garden, fluffy mashed potatoes, and a vibrant salad drizzled with homemade dressing. She lit candles in the dining room, set out his favorite wine, and even wore a simple yet elegant dress she thought he liked. He never showed up. Midnight came and went, and Stella sat alone at the dining table, the food cold and untouched. Her calls went straight to voicemail. The staff avoided her gaze, no one offering an explanation, though she suspected they knew more than they let on. The hush that enveloped the corridors felt oppressive. In the early hours, Everett finally returned. She heard the chime of the front doors and hurried downstairs, only to find him reeking of alcohol and expensive perfume that was most definitely not hers. His hair was disheveled, his tie askew. He merely mumbled something about business negotiations before stumbling toward the guest bedroom. Stella wanted to confront him, but fear and shock paralyzed her. She watched in dismay as he slammed the door behind him. Was it stress from the family business, or did he simply not care about her efforts? That night, she slept in their enormous bed alone, the pillow beside her untouched and cold. Over the following weeks, Stella discovered that business dinners and late-night meetings were becoming Everett's norm. Sometimes he was accompanied by potential investors or development partners, and sometimes by socialites who made headlines. The household staff, ever discreet, inadvertently dropped hints. Stella overheard two maids whispering about how Mr. Langford didn't come home until dawn and how they had seen him stepping out of a limousine with a tall brunette at the estate gates. Another time, she intercepted glances in the hallway that suggested pity, as though everyone knew something she didn't. One evening, a long-time cook named Martha quietly pulled Stella aside. Martha was older, with grey streaks in her hair and motherly concern etched across her face. "Mrs. Langford," she said softly, "take care of yourself. The men in this house don't always treat their wives with kindness." Stella was startled. "What do you mean?" Martha looked away, as though regretting her words, then hurried off without another explanation. That cryptic warning gnawed at Stella, fueling an undercurrent of anxiety she couldn't dispel. She wanted to believe that Everett might simply be in over his head, handling more responsibilities than he could manage, or clinging to the high society lifestyle he inherited. She tried to push away dark thoughts of infidelity. The idea of him cheating, after all, contradicted the sweet, attentive fiancé he had been. And so she tolerated the excuses, the missed dinners, the empty bed. She made her own routines: morning yoga in the garden, reading in the estate library, volunteering in the afternoons. If Everett asked about her day, she recounted it with forced cheeriness, hoping that genuine warmth would bridge the emotional gap forming between them. It was a sudden wave of dizziness that led Stella to take a pregnancy test. She had been feeling more fatigued than usual, occasionally lightheaded, and even her appetite fluctuated strangely. Intrigued, but also quietly excited at the prospect, she bought a test from a nearby pharmacy. The little plus sign on the strip confirmed that a new life was forming inside her. Despite the worry about Everett's erratic behavior, Stella felt an upswell of pure joy. She imagined a child inheriting Everett's quick smile or her own gentle heart. She daydreamed about the possibility that the innocence of a baby could soften Everett's hardened edges. That evening, she tried to create another special moment. She prepared a delicate meal of pasta, tossed with fresh basil and cherry tomatoes, lit the dining room candles, and placed the positive pregnancy test in a small velvet box next to Everett's dinner plate. He arrived 2 hours late, tie undone, hair ruffled from a wind that had carried him who knew where. With a sigh, he slumped into the chair, ignoring her anxious smile. "Long day," he muttered, pouring himself a hefty glass of red wine. Stella nudged the box toward him, her heart racing. "I have something to show you." Everett opened the box, stared at the test for a moment, then exhaled sharply. "Is this a pregnancy test?" he asked, a hint of annoyance in his voice. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "We're going to have a baby." Rather than the elation she hoped for, Everett's expression grew tense. He managed a small, forced smile and said, "Well, that's something. I guess we should find the best doctor. People say Dr. Whitmore at Cedars-Sinai is good." She waited for him to beam with excitement or scoop her into his arms, but it never happened. He took a sip of his wine, as if needing liquid courage to face the notion of fatherhood. For a moment, Stella felt her heart fracture. Yet she consoled herself. At least he acknowledged it and seemed willing to handle the practicalities. Perhaps, with time, he would embrace the idea of their growing family. Word of Stella's pregnancy spread quickly among the household staff. Some offered genuine congratulations, while others seemed fearful, as though they worried what changes might come with a new heir in the Langford family. Everett's father, Gerald Langford, arranged a celebratory dinner at the mansion. Family members, close associates, and a handful of local dignitaries attended. Over fancy hors d'oeuvre and champagne toasts, Gerald announced that the Langford lineage would soon continue through his forthcoming grandchild. On the surface, it was a moment of pride and unity. Yet Stella noticed Everett ducking out multiple times to take phone calls. Each time he returned, his jaw set tighter, as though dealing with an infuriating business matter. She tried to brush it aside, focusing instead on the well-wishers who approached her with cautious but polite remarks. After the festivities, she found Everett in the estate gardens, phone in hand. She overheard him whispering, "No, Jennifer, not tonight." When he saw Stella, he hung up abruptly. "Who's Jennifer?" she asked, trying to keep her tone steady. He paused, then forced a laugh. "She's an investor, trying to push some new proposals on me." Though the explanation sounded rational, Stella sensed more than a spark of tension in his manner. The name Jennifer lodged in her mind, an unwelcome guest she couldn't dispel. As her pregnancy progressed, Stella tried to approach life with optimism. She read parenting books, joined a gentle yoga class geared toward expectant mothers, and set aside a sunlit room in the mansion for a nursery. She filled the corners with plush animals and arranged small hand-painted stars on the walls, imagining the wonder in her future child's eyes. Everett paid for the finest prenatal care, scheduling her with Dr. Whitmore at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, a real and highly respected hospital in Los Angeles known for its comprehensive maternity services. However, he seldom attended the appointments himself. Usually, he delegated a driver to take Stella and told her he was too inundated with meetings to come along. Every so often, though, he displayed fleeting glimpses of tenderness. He would place a careful hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick, and his face would soften. Stella clung to those moments, telling herself that once the baby arrived, perhaps fatherhood would awaken a more attentive, loving side of Everett. But at night, when he was out until the early hours, that hope wavered. She heard stories from acquaintances that they'd spotted him at exclusive nightclubs, always in the company of a beautiful woman, sometimes a blonde, sometimes a brunette, and often at the White Oak Lounge, a trendy hotspot favored by wealthy socialites. Stella tried to confront him gently about the rumors, but each time he brushed her off with vague explanations. "It's just networking," he would say. "Clients expect a certain level of entertainment. Stop worrying." Yet her heart grew heavy with dread. She could sense the intangible barrier between them, growing thicker, like walls in a labyrinth she might never escape. At around 6 months pregnant, Stella experienced an unsettling development that confirmed her worst fears. She opened her car door one morning to find a blank white envelope on the driver's seat. Inside were photographs depicting Everett at the White Oak Lounge, his arm wrapped intimately around the waist of a tall, dark-haired woman, their lips dangerously close. A spark of nausea roiled in Stella's stomach. She slammed the door shut, her hands trembling. Who had taken these photographs, and who had placed them in her car? She scanned the estate grounds, half expecting to see a paparazzo or a disgruntled staff member lurking in the shadows. But the driveway was silent, the hedges immaculately trimmed. She stuffed the envelope in her purse, her mind racing. Should she confront Everett? A wave of vulnerability hit her. Her father had always taught her to face challenges head-on, but the fear of losing everything, of making a spectacle that might harm her child, weighed her down like an anchor. Stella waited until evening, her heart pounding, the pictures burning a hole in her thoughts. She tried to remain calm when Everett returned. He waltzed into the living room with that casual indifference she had come to despise. Stella produced the envelope and handed it to him without a word. He flicked through the images, a flicker of panic in his eyes, but quickly replaced by an indignant sneer. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "Someone's trying to smear me. Probably a rival from another hotel chain." Stella's voice shook, but she managed to speak. "This woman, this is the investor you mentioned before," he scoffed. "Yes, Jennifer Marsh. She's investing in a new property we're developing in Chicago. These photos are obviously taken out of context. You know how these gossip rags twist everything." She wanted to believe him, but even the best illusions fray under enough pressure. The pictures told a story too intimate to dismiss. "Please just be honest with me," she whispered. He rubbed his forehead, exhaling sharply. "I'm being honest. I told you this is strictly business. I have no time for this nonsense." With that, he tore the photos in half and tossed them into the nearest waste bin, storming out of the room. Stella stared at the ragged remnants, her mind in turmoil. She felt a sharp kick from the baby, as if it, too, sensed her heartbreak. A few days later, while volunteering at the Children's Hospital, Stella reconnected with a childhood friend named Carolyn West. They had grown up in the same small town, though Carolyn had moved away in her teens. Stella recognized Carolyn's voice in the hospital hallway before she even saw her face. Overjoyed at the reunion, Stella hugged Carolyn tightly, tears threatening to spill. Carolyn had become a social worker, dedicating her career to helping vulnerable families. When Stella mentioned her pregnancy, Carolyn's face lit with warmth, but it quickly turned to concern when Stella revealed the troubles in her marriage. They went for a walk around the hospital grounds after Stella's volunteer shift ended. Under the shadow of an old oak tree, Stella confided her fears, the suspicious photos, and Everett's coldness. She clutched her swollen belly protectively as she spoke, her voice trembling. Carolyn listened intently, then placed a comforting hand on her friend's shoulder. "You're not alone," she said softly. "If things escalate, I want you to know there are resources and shelters that can help, even for someone in your financial bracket. But more importantly, you have me." Stella felt a rush of gratitude. She wasn't ready to leave the marriage, holding on to the last thread of hope that once the baby arrived, Everett might transform into a better man. Still, having Carolyn's support was like stepping into a shaft of sunlight after months of darkness. By Stella's 7th month, a hush of dread lay over the mansion. Everett's father, Gerald, had gotten word of scandalous rumors involving Jennifer Marsh. He summoned Everett for a private discussion, which erupted into shouts Stella could hear from her bedroom. The argument ended with Everett storming out, slamming doors in his wake. That evening at dinner, Everett was subdued, picking at his food while Stella mustered the courage to speak. "Your father. I heard you both arguing," she ventured. Everett shrugged, swirling a glass of expensive bourbon. "He's overreacting. He's worried about potential PR damage to the Langford name. As if I'm some child who can't handle a contract negotiation." Stella eyed him carefully, wondering if his father's rebuke might spur him to reconsider his behavior. But instead, Everett doubled down on arrogance, complaining about how controlling his father could be. "I'm your wife," she finally said, "not some business associate. If you're in trouble, or if you need someone to lean on." He cut her off with a bitter laugh. "You wouldn't understand. Just stay out of it, Stella." She bit her tongue, feeling tears threaten. She was pregnant, exhausted, and longing for genuine intimacy. But all she got was a wall. A week later, Dr. Whitmore expressed concern at Stella's checkup. Her blood pressure had been creeping upward, an alarming sign that could indicate preeclampsia. Concerned for her and the baby's well-being, he recommended she reduce stress and get extra rest. Stella gave a soft laugh at the idea of reducing stress. She lived in a veritable palace that might as well have been a prison of swirling gossip and tense silences. "I'll try," she promised. She texted Everett to inform him of the doctor's concerns. He replied hours later with a curt message, "Understood. Will arrange extra staff if needed." He never inquired how she was feeling or whether she needed emotional support. The gap between them felt like an endless chasm. Stella spoke with Carolyn that night, tears pouring forth. Carolyn encouraged her to consider staying elsewhere, at least temporarily. But Stella hesitated. With her due date looming, she worried about how a sudden move would affect medical care and her stability. The mansion might feel suffocating, but at least it had ready access to resources in case of an emergency. She promised Carolyn she'd keep an open mind, and that, if the tension escalated, she'd leave without hesitation. 2 weeks before her expected due date, Stella had an ultrasound appointment at Cedars-Sinai. She reminded Everett multiple times about the date, texting and calling. She desperately wanted him there, to share the joy of seeing their baby move on the monitor, to hear the heartbeat in real time. The night before the appointment, Stella barely slept, anxious but hopeful. Maybe Everett would surprise her by showing up. Maybe this time would be different. The following morning she arrived at the hospital. The waiting area was bustling with expectant mothers, some with doting partners at their side. She tried not to glance too often at the entrance. Dr. Whitmore called her in. Stella changed into the examination gown, the hum of medical equipment filling her ears. As the ultrasound began, she watched her baby's tiny form wriggle on the screen. Tears pricked her eyes at the wonder of it. Then she looked at the empty seat beside her. "Is your husband coming?" Dr. Whitmore asked gently. She shook her head, forcing a tight smile. He was busy. The exam proceeded smoothly, though Dr. Whitmore reiterated concerns about her blood pressure. He also mentioned that the baby seemed slightly large, which could indicate a need for careful monitoring. "That means no undue stress," he said, patting her shoulder. "We want both of you to be safe." Stella nodded, determined to create a calm environment. As she left the hospital, she noticed a glossy magazine on a nearby newsstand. The cover showed Everett at a high-profile charity function the night before, accompanied by none other than Jennifer Marsh. The headline read, "Langford Heir Courts Controversy While Wife Nears Due Date." Her stomach knotted. The heartbreak was becoming public fodder. She quickly left, feeling exposed and ashamed. Back at the mansion, Stella tried to rest, following Dr. Whitmore's advice. She spent time in the baby's nursery, listening to calming music and occasionally whispering to her belly about how they would soon meet face to face. Late that afternoon, while reading in bed, she felt a stabbing pain in her lower abdomen. At first, she dismissed it as Braxton Hicks contractions, but the pain returned with sharper intensity. Her heartbeat raced as she recognized the difference. This was labor, or something dangerously close to it, arriving too early and too violently. She called out to the staff for help. A housekeeper rushed in, wide-eyed, and phoned for Everett's driver. Stella also frantically called Everett, but her calls went to voicemail. She sent a desperate text, "I'm in labor. Please come. I need you." No response. By the time the driver brought Stella to the hospital, the pain was excruciating, and she felt disoriented. Nurses hurried to her side, hooking her up to monitors. The baby's heartbeat was erratic, and Stella's blood pressure soared, a terrifying sign of potential complications like preeclampsia or worse. Carolyn arrived soon after, alerted by a panicked message Stella had managed to send. She clasped Stella's hand, speaking words of encouragement as doctors and nurses bustled around them. A whirlwind of medical chatter surrounded Stella, the baby's in distress. "We may need an emergency C-section. Prepare thee," or... All Stella wanted was Everett by her side, but all she got was emptiness. The hospital's bright overhead lights blinded her as she was wheeled into the operating room. The smell of antiseptic filled her nostrils, and panic clawed at her chest. She had dreamt so many times of a joyful birth, Everett holding her hand. Instead, she gripped Carolyn's fingers, tears rolling down her cheeks. Dr. Whitmore, masked and determined, tried to soothe Stella. "Focus on your breathing. We'll take care of you and the baby." The beep of machines provided a terrifying soundtrack. Stella felt pressure, tugging, a swirl of dizziness. She heard muffled instructions from the anesthesiologist, a blur of instruments. Time bent and warped under the haze of fear and medication. Then, at last, she heard a sharp, piercing cry that ripped through her numbness. Her baby had arrived. The doctors lifted a tiny, wailing girl, showing her briefly to Stella before whisking her away to be checked. Despite the overwhelming relief, Stella's heart ached. This precious moment was overshadowed by Everett's absence. She had just endured surgery, fear, and heartbreak, and the man who had once swept her off her feet was nowhere to be found. Hours later, Stella woke in a private recovery room, Carolyn seated beside her with eyes red from crying. The baby, named Penelope Grace, lay in a small bassinet nearby, sleeping peacefully. Stella motioned Carolyn closer. "Is she okay?" Carolyn nodded, wiping away a tear. She's perfect, Stella. The doctors say she's healthy. Despite her exhaustion, Stella felt a surge of maternal love. She turned her head toward the bassinet, tears welling up at the sight of this tiny miracle with a shock of dark hair. That moment of pure joy was interrupted by the beep of her phone. A text message from Everett finally arrived. She fumbled for the device, heart fluttering with hope. Perhaps he was on his way, or maybe he was sorry. "I'm busy in a meeting. Stop messaging me. I'll call later." Pain, sharper than any contraction, tore through Stella's chest. Carolyn leaned over, reading the text with a grim expression. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Fresh tears stung Stella's eyes. He couldn't even come for his daughter's birth. Carolyn pursed her lips, hesitating. "There's more. There's a story going around online. Everett was spotted at a private dinner with Jennifer Marsh the same night you were rushed here." Stella's entire body trembled. The betrayal was monstrous, and the heartbreak unimaginable. She closed her eyes, hugging a pillow to muffle her sobs. Carolyn gently stroked her back, tears in her own eyes, wishing she could shield her friend from such cruelty. Word of Everett's absence from the birth exploded across social media. Once a nurse, horrified by Stella's plight, leaked the story to a small entertainment blog. The headline read, "Millionaire Everett Langford misses birth of child for dinner date with socialite wife, undergoes emergency C-section alone." In a matter of hours, the gossip spread. Bigger outlets picked it up, fueling widespread outrage. Online commentators branded Everett a callous playboy and a shame to fatherhood. Even some of his wealthiest associates expressed disgust, cancelling or postponing business deals with the Langford family. Gerald Langford, mortified by the negative publicity, released a statement disowning any knowledge of his son's personal indiscretions. He tried to salvage the family brand, but the internet was ruthless. The scandal overshadowed even other society dramas of the week, with some petitions calling for a boycott of Langford hotels. In her hospital room, Stella scrolled through article after article, each one twisting the knife deeper. She didn't want the world's pity, but she received it in torrents. A few tabloids shared paparazzi photos of Stella, disheveled and pale, cradling Penelope in her arms, while Carolyn walked protectively beside her. The images served as stark evidence of her solitude during this critical life event. When Everett finally arrived at Cedars-Sinai nearly a full day later, he wore a tailored suit and a strained expression. He entered Stella's room as though walking into a hostile board meeting. Stella, too drained for a shouting match, merely gazed at him with an unreadable expression. He cleared his throat, eyes glancing at the sleeping Penelope. "I came as soon as I could," he lied, voice devoid of genuine regret. Carolyn stood by, arms crossed, but Stella gestured for her to step outside. She wanted to face Everett alone. "You missed the birth," Stella said quietly, her throat tight. "Our daughter was born, and you were with Jennifer." Everett ran a hand through his hair, the faint smell of expensive cologne trailing him. "Stella, you have no idea what kind of pressure I'm under. Jennifer's an important investor. This negative publicity is threatening the entire family business." She felt her blood pressure spike again. And what about Penelope's birth? Was that not important? He swallowed, glancing uneasily at the baby. "Of course it's important. I just couldn't get away." A tear slid down Stella's cheek. "You chose not to come," she murmured. "You left me alone. I could have died." His eyes flickered with something akin to remorse, but it vanished too quickly. "Let's not be dramatic. You're fine, and the baby's fine. Look, I've spoken to PR. We'll handle this situation, put out a statement that everything's fine between us. You just need to cooperate." It was like a slap to her face. He viewed her crisis as mere PR damage control. A swirling anger churned in her belly, mixing with heartbreak. "I'm not playing a part in your public show anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling. Without another word, Everett left, not bothering to hold his child or apologize for the pain he caused. Stella spent another week in the hospital, recovering from the C-section. Carolyn arranged for top-quality postpartum support, ensuring Stella received lactation guidance and mental health check-ins. Despite everything, looking into Penelope's curious eyes filled Stella with a love so profound it eclipsed her despair. Yet the illusions she once clung to were thoroughly shattered. She realized her marriage had been built on a foundation that was more image than substance. And as the scandal continued to rage in the media, Stella found herself subjected to prying journalists who camped outside Cedars-Sinai, hoping for a quote or photograph. During one particularly restless afternoon, Stella scrolled through her phone, reading comments on social media. Strangers rallied around her, expressing sympathy and urging her to leave Everett. Others criticized her for not seeing the red flags sooner. The swirl of opinions threatened to overwhelm her, but a renewed sense of clarity emerged. She called a lawyer named Marcia Lind, recommended by Carolyn. Marcia specialized in family law and agreed to meet Stella at the hospital. When Marcia arrived, she was calm yet firm, offering Stella legal advice on how to protect herself and Penelope. "I know you're in a vulnerable position," Marcia said gently, "but you have rights. If you want to separate, file for custody, or even just negotiate child support, you're in a strong position. Don't let anyone intimidate you." Unsurprisingly, the idea of Stella seeking legal counsel triggered Everett's fury. She tried to speak with him calmly, explaining that they needed a more formal arrangement for Penelope's sake. He erupted in anger during a phone call, hurling accusations that she was out to ruin him. "You want my money?" he shouted. "You want to tear me down in the press? You realize who you're dealing with?" Stella's voice quivered, but she remained composed. "I want stability for our daughter, that's all. If you can't be a consistent presence, you should at least contribute financially so she can have a decent life," he sneered. "Do you realize how much this scandal has cost me already? Investors are backing out. My father is livid, and my name is in tatters. Congratulations, Stella." Before she could respond, the line went dead. The conversation left her shaken, but oddly resolute. She contacted Marcia again, telling the lawyer she wanted to move forward with a custody and support case. Her father's old saying rang in her ears. "You can't fix what refuses to be mended, but you can build something better from the ashes." Meanwhile, Jennifer Marsh faced her own backlash. Her association with Everett had thrust her into the spotlight, and she found herself labeled as a homewrecker. Business associates began distancing themselves. Rumors surfaced that she had a history of getting close to wealthy men for financial gain. Whether these rumors were true or fabricated, they tarnished her social standing. In a surprising twist, Jennifer attempted to do damage control by publicly claiming that Everett had misled her into believing he was single. She went on a talk show, tearfully stating that she was just a naive investor, seduced by his charm. Paparazzi captured her leaving the studio in tears. Stella watched the interview on television, feeling a swirl of emotions, anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of pity. The woman who played a role in her heartbreak now seemed to be drowning in her own downfall. Yet Stella couldn't muster much sympathy. She was too busy grappling with her own life, one that included a newborn who needed her undivided care. Once discharged, Stella chose not to return to the Langford mansion. Instead, she accepted Carolyn's offer to temporarily stay at her apartment, a modest but cozy place in a quiet neighborhood. Carolyn set up a small corner for Penelope's crib, and Stella tried to create a sense of home in the unfamiliar space. For the first time in months, Stella felt a weight lift. No more staff wandering the halls, no more sprawling emptiness. She cared for Penelope in the warm hum of Carolyn's living room, feeding her while daytime television droned in the background. She even tried to do light household tasks, though Carolyn often insisted she rest. Still, financial security loomed as a concern. Stella had left her editing job to focus on her pregnancy and marriage, expecting that the Langford fortune would cushion any breaks in her career. Now she felt the need to regain independence. She consulted with Marcia to ensure she wasn't jeopardizing her legal standing by leaving the estate. Marcia assured her that, given the circumstances, Everett's public indiscretions, neglect, and the toxic environment, she had every right to live elsewhere for her own well-being. Stella also quietly visited her bank to check the status of her joint accounts. Unsurprisingly, Everett had restricted her access. She had only a small personal savings, which she guarded carefully. The day of the preliminary custody hearing arrived, marked by tension and swirling media attention. Paparazzi snapped photos of Stella outside the courthouse, wearing a simple knee-length dress and carrying Penelope in her arms. Carolyn accompanied her as moral support, while Marcia handled the legal arguments. Everett appeared in a sleek black suit, flanked by his own team of expensive attorneys. His demeanor dripped with resentment. Even so, he occasionally glanced at Penelope, an unreadable expression crossing his face. Inside the courtroom, Marcia presented a compelling case. Stella was the primary caregiver. Everett's actions had endangered Stella's emotional well-being, and he had effectively abandoned her during a medical emergency. Everett's attorneys countered that Stella had overreacted, that Everett's business obligations were misunderstood, and that the media coverage unfairly painted him as a villain. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a stern gaze, requested time to review the evidence. In the interim, she granted Stella temporary full custody, with supervised visitation for Everett until a more thorough assessment could be made. An undercurrent of relief washed over Stella, but she also felt an ache, remembering how she once envisioned a loving family and a supportive husband. Now she faced the man who had once knelt with a diamond ring, and he was little more than a stranger across the courtroom aisle. Parallel to the custody drama, Langford Enterprises experienced a financial downturn. Negative publicity, cancelled hotel reservations, and disenchanted investors all conspired to bring the empire to its knees. Gerald Langford publicly chastised Everett, accusing him of derailing their legacy. Behind closed doors, board members threatened to strip Everett of any decision-making power. Desperate to salvage his reputation, Everett proposed a facade of reconciliation with Stella, urging her to appear at a family press conference and smile for the cameras. When he approached Stella with this suggestion, she saw the hollowness in his eyes. "You've got nerve," she said bitterly. "You want me to pretend we're still a happy couple, so the tabloids will back off?" He didn't deny it. "It's for the sake of the business. We can discuss your compensation if you cooperate." She stared at him, disbelief etched across her face. "You left me alone to face a life or death situation. You missed your daughter's birth, and now you want me to lie to the world to protect your enterprise?" His voice took on a desperate edge. "I'm losing everything, Stella. Everything. You think this is fun for me? If you just help me out, maybe we can get through this." Stella's eyes burned with tears. "Get out. I'm done with your games." He left, slamming the door. She stood rooted to the spot, holding Penelope, who began to fuss at the loud noise. Stella soothed her baby, murmuring reassurance to them both. As if the drama weren't enough, Jennifer Marsh unexpectedly contacted Stella, requesting a face-to-face meeting. Initially, Stella balked at the idea, but curiosity gnawed at her. Maybe Jennifer had information crucial to the custody battle, or maybe she wanted to deliver some twisted apology. They met at a modest cafe, far from the glitzy venues Jennifer usually frequented. Jennifer arrived wearing large sunglasses and a scarf, perhaps to avoid paparazzi. When she removed the glasses, Stella saw the strain in her eyes, the faint lines of regret or exhaustion. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Jennifer began, voice subdued. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Stella's posture stiffened. Sorry for what, exactly? For the affair, or for the public humiliation, or for... Jennifer raised a trembling hand. "For all of it. It started as a business partnership, but Everett led me on. He said your marriage was basically over, that you were staying for appearances. I let myself believe him because it benefited my investments. I was selfish." Stella listened, a swirl of emotions churning in her. She thought about the hours she'd spent crying, the fear she'd felt when giving birth alone. "I lost everything," Jennifer continued. "My reputation is trashed, my sponsors pulled out, and I can barely show my face in social circles. I'm trying to rebuild my life. I just wanted you to know I regret it." Stella stared at the woman who contributed to her heartbreak. She found a measure of pity mixed with anger. Ultimately, she nodded. "Thank you for apologizing, but I can't say it fixes anything." Jennifer's eyes glistened. "I understand. I just needed you to know." With that, Jennifer stood, placed some cash on the table for her coffee, and left. Stella remained, feeling an odd sense of closure. The final string in the twisted tapestry of betrayal had snapped. Weeks turned into months, and Stella began to reclaim her life. She found a small apartment she could afford with the temporary support order in place. Carolyn helped her furnish it with gently used items, painting the walls a warm, inviting color. She created a charming nursery corner for Penelope, complete with a hand-me-down rocking chair where she'd sing lullabies. Stella also resumed part-time editing work, taking on freelance projects she could manage from home. Penelope napped in a bassinet beside her desk, and Stella worked late into the night, fueled by a new sense of purpose. Gradually, the media frenzy died down, replaced by fresher scandals and news cycles. Yet Stella's story continued to resonate with those who followed it, especially women who reached out via social media to share their own tales of heartbreak and resilience. Everett's attempts at damage control remained unsuccessful. His father stripped him of major responsibilities within the company, labeling him a liability. Board members considered ousting him entirely. He faced financial audits that hinted at deeper mismanagement, further damaging any credibility he had left. At last, the final custody hearing arrived. By this time, Everett had managed a few superficial visits with Penelope, though he seemed distant, unsure how to interact with his child. Marcia Lind gathered a wealth of evidence documenting Everett's neglect and Stella's consistent care. In court, the judge reviewed statements, financial records, and character references. Stella felt butterflies in her stomach, remembering how she once longed to see Everett cradling Penelope. Now she prayed the judge would secure a safe future for her baby. Everett's lawyers struggled to build a case for shared custody, given his inconsistent involvement. The judge delivered a clear decision. Stella would have full legal and physical custody of Penelope, with Everett granted visitation under conditions that ensured the child's well-being. He was also ordered to pay substantial child support. While Stella felt relief, she also experienced a pang of sadness. Any shred of the old dream, a happy family united under one roof, had been irreparably shattered. But as she glanced at Penelope, who gazed at her with big, curious eyes, she felt the weight of heartbreak give way to the warmth of unconditional love. That evening, Stella returned to her cozy apartment. Carolyn joined her in a small celebration, complete with takeout pizza and a homemade cake. Penelope slept soundly in her crib, and for the first time in a long while, Stella felt something akin to peace. In the days that followed, her life took on a comforting rhythm. She continued freelancing, occasionally letting her mind wander to the future. Maybe she would open a small boutique publishing house or write a memoir to help other women avoid the pitfalls she'd experienced. She also found solace in volunteering again, this time helping new mothers who lacked family support. Everett, meanwhile, faded from the headlines. He spent his days scrambling to fix the wreckage of his career and the tarnished family empire. Rumors swirled that a group of investors considered taking legal action against him for fraudulent practices. If karma had a design, it was weaving its thread around him tightly. Whenever Stella reflected on the heartbreak she endured, she found unexpected strength. She had survived betrayal, public scandal, and the terror of giving birth alone. And from that crucible of pain, she emerged with a stronger sense of self, a devotion to her daughter that no one could fracture. Penelope thrived, babbling and grabbing for colorful toys, nuzzling into Stella's arms at night. Her existence reminded Stella that real love was not about grandeur or spectacle, but about presence, consistency, and kindness. Stella vowed to provide these things for her daughter, no matter what storms might come. Months later, Stella took Penelope to a peaceful city park. On a sunny afternoon, she sat on a bench, enjoying the gentle breeze, watching children feed ducks in the pond. Penelope cooed in her stroller, fascinated by the swirling water. In a twist of fate, Stella spotted Everett walking along a distant path. Alone, he wore casual clothes, looking thinner, older, his posture slumped. Their eyes locked momentarily, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He gave a feeble wave, then turned away, blending into the crowd. Stella felt a pang of sorrow for the man he might have been, but she also felt gratitude for the life she had now, the life she created on her own terms. She leaned down and kissed Penelope's forehead. "Let's go feed the ducks," she whispered. And with that simple act, she chose to keep moving forward, leaving behind the shadows of a past that no longer defined her. A single moment can change a life's direction. For Stella, it was standing alone at Cedar Sinai, about to give birth while her husband reveled in wealth and betrayal. She could have remained trapped in bitterness or lost in self-pity. Instead, she found courage. Through heartbreak, she discovered a love far more powerful than any mansion or diamond ring, the unconditional bond with her daughter.
He was the dashing mogul every ambitious entrepreneur wanted to emulate. She was the poised, loyal wife who had stood by him from humble beginnings. No one would have guessed that behind the gated mansion's manicured lawns, betrayal festered like poison. Until one day, in a flurry of financial sabotage, he let his mistress cut off his wife's credit cards. It was humiliating, scandalous, and only the beginning of a whirlwind that would pit powerful business alliances against each other. In a boardroom confrontation that stunned everyone, the CEO himself stepped in, but not in the way anyone expected. Buckle up. This is the story of love, greed, and revenge. Jordan Alberts was not born into luxury. He grew up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Milwaukee, where he learned to hustle by selling candy bars door to door at the age of 10. Over the years, Jordan's unwavering determination and charm propelled him into better circles. First at a local startup, then into his own tech company that caught the eye of an angel investor. By the time he was 35, Jordan was a self-made millionaire, a prominent figure on various entrepreneurial boards, and had connections with people like Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, and a few top executives at Google. His wife, Elizabeth Alberts née Wagner, had been with him through everything. They met in college at a small tech entrepreneur club meeting, both bright-eyed and dreaming of changing the world. Elizabeth came from a modest background, too. Her father was a retired auto mechanic, and her mother a homemaker. She'd studied communications with an emphasis on public relations, and it was through Elizabeth's network of contacts that Jordan first gained access to small local pitch events. While Jordan pitched his innovative software for automating small business tasks, Elizabeth made calls, arranged coffee meetups, and tried to capture the interest of potential backers. They married in a little chapel by Lake Michigan. It wasn't a lavish wedding, no star-studded guest list, no fancy reception at the Ritz. But to Jordan and Elizabeth, it felt perfect. A union built on genuine love, unwavering support, and a shared dream of building a life and a business empire together. Over the next decade, they grew from a modest condominium in Milwaukee to a stunning estate in Austin near Lake Travis, with a sweeping view of the water and rolling Texas hills. It was there at a philanthropic event organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that Jordan's name landed on the radar of top-level investors. His company's smart automation technology was recognized for its potential to transform not just small businesses, but large-scale manufacturing and logistics. Soon after, Jordan's net worth skyrocketed from a mere $5 million to well over $200 million. For a while, everything was picture perfect. The marriage was strong, their personal synergy unwavering. Elizabeth handled some philanthropic duties, organizing events, acting as a goodwill ambassador for Jordan's brand, and forging new partnerships through her PR background. Their household staff adored them, describing Elizabeth as kind, gracious, and always mindful of the people around her. But money can be a seductive force, and success can open doors to darker temptations. Jordan began attending more exclusive networking events in Beverly Hills, New York, and beyond. Elizabeth was often at his side, but there were times she couldn't attend. Perhaps she was busy finalizing the details for a charity gala, or maybe she was simply burnt out from the unrelenting schedule. It was during these times, rare at first, then increasingly common, that Jordan got close to someone else. Her name was Ava Monroe. She was a rising star in the world of technology law, representing high-profile clients like Tesla, Amazon, and a few top-tier cryptocurrency exchanges. She had a reputation for being ruthless in negotiations, seductive in social gatherings, and unbelievably charming behind closed doors. The rumor mill started buzzing the moment Ava was seen at Jordan's table during a private dinner after a tech summit in Las Vegas. Elizabeth wasn't there. She had chosen to stay in Austin, meeting with a team of female entrepreneurs Jordan was mentoring. A few people whispered about Jordan's visible fascination with Ava, the way he leaned in whenever she spoke, how they clinked champagne flutes with an intimacy that suggested more than just business talk. No one knew for certain how fast or how deep it went, but soon the signs became undeniable. Lavish gifts appeared on Ava's social media, including a diamond bracelet, suspiciously similar to the ones Jordan's company had once gifted important clients. Photos emerged of Jordan and Ava at high-end restaurants in Manhattan, always carefully angled to obscure Jordan's face, though keen observers could still identify him by the sliver of a recognizable watch or the faint reflection in a mirrored wall. By the time the rumors reached Elizabeth, they were no longer rumors, but near-confirmed facts. She felt her chest tighten, her world spinning out of control. This couldn't be real. Jordan had always been a loyal partner. But the evidence was too compelling to deny. She confronted him in the privacy of their Lakeview mansion. At first, Jordan denied everything. Yet denial quickly turned into a half-hearted admission once Elizabeth presented him with photographic evidence. Like a skilled negotiator used to controlling deals, Jordan tried to manipulate the situation, insisting that Ava was just a business associate, someone he occasionally had dinner with. But Elizabeth saw right through it. She had always been adept at reading him. A chill settled over their once loving home. Elizabeth, determined to preserve her dignity, demanded they enter marriage counseling, or at the very least step away from high-profile events until they resolved their issues in private. Jordan nodded, providing non-committal answers. He had never liked therapy, never seen the point in discussing feelings with a stranger. He agreed to her wishes on the surface, yet beneath the facade, he continued his involvement with Ava, allowing the illicit relationship to take root. This was the calm before the storm. For soon Elizabeth's sense of betrayal would pale in comparison to the massive financial and emotional blow about to come her way. Weeks passed. Elizabeth tried to focus on her philanthropic work and personal projects, attempting to distract herself from the growing chasm between her and Jordan. When a local charity she sponsored invited her to discuss future donations, Elizabeth discovered something shocking. Her personal credit card was declined. Embarrassment washed over her in front of the unsuspecting staff. She tried another card. Sure, it must have been a glitch, but that too was declined. The staff politely suggested she call her bank, and Elizabeth excused herself with a polite smile, her hands trembling as she left the office. Elizabeth called the bank suspecting fraud or an administrative error, but the bank's representative informed her that both cards had been cancelled the previous week. Under their joint account, they were tied to Jordan's finances, and evidently Jordan had authorized the cancellation. It felt like a punch to the gut. Why on earth would Jordan cancel her cards without her knowledge or consent? They had never had major financial disputes. Elizabeth always had access to family funds, albeit responsibly. She dialed Jordan, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent him several frantic texts. No response. Later that evening, Jordan came home exuding an air of tired disinterest. Elizabeth confronted him the moment he walked through the door. Under the chandelier's glow, which reflected in her tear-filled eyes, Jordan brushed aside her questions with a dismissive wave. "I needed to consolidate our finances," he said, removing his blazer. "You can use the joint checking account for a while." "No big deal, no big deal." Elizabeth's frustration swelled. "You cancelled my credit cards without even telling me what's going on. Are you punishing me for something?" Jordan's eyes flicked away nervously, and that was when Elizabeth realized he was lying again. The next words that came from his mouth were not only shocking, but also laced with a cruelty she never imagined he was capable of. "Ava suggested we revisit some of my expenses. She found that you were spending frivolously. It made sense to limit credit usage." Elizabeth's heart dropped to her stomach. Ava. That woman was now meddling in their finances. As if the affair wasn't enough, Jordan had allowed this mistress to encroach into an arena that Elizabeth believed was sacred, her own household stability. "What is Ava doing reviewing my spending? Since when does your fling get to decide what is or isn't frivolous?" Elizabeth spat tears, threatening to spill. Jordan made an attempt at a calming gesture, but his words only fanned the flames. "She's helping me restructure. Her firm has great insights into corporate finances. This is about the business, Elizabeth. It's not personal." Not personal. Elizabeth recalled how intimately personal their marriage had always been. They built every aspect of their lives together, from small decisions about wallpaper colors to big entrepreneurial leaps that demanded everything from both of them. Now Jordan was shutting her out, consulting Ava instead. In a quavering voice, Elizabeth demanded, "Reinstate my cards. I am your wife. I have a right to our finances, and you know I've never been irresponsible with money." Jordan's face hardened with a new arrogance. "Not until we finalize our restructure," he said, referring to some nebulous plan Elizabeth knew little about. "I'll handle everything in the meantime." That moment, that cold exchange, was a harbinger of the bigger heartbreak to come. If Jordan was letting Ava control such details, what other aspects of their marriage was he willing to let her sabotage? As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth discovered one more blow after another. The monthly allowance she used to cover household expenses had been slashed without explanation. The staff, including her personal assistant, was laid off. Bills began piling up, addressed to her name, but with no means to pay them aside from groveling at Jordan's feet. Friends and family started to notice. Elizabeth tried to hide her shame. She confided in her sister Caroline, who was enraged at Jordan. "This is financial abuse," Caroline insisted. "You should speak to a lawyer." Elizabeth shuddered at the thought. She still believed they could salvage their relationship, that Jordan would snap out of whatever daze Ava had put him in. Yet a small part of her whispered that maybe Caroline was right. Then came a fateful meeting at a hotel conference suite in Los Angeles, one that Jordan had insisted Elizabeth attend. It was a gathering of major tech moguls, including Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who were rumored to be there to discuss new tech innovations in global logistics. When Elizabeth arrived, she quickly realized something was off. She saw Jordan in the lounge area, standing far too close to Ava, exchanging hushed conversations. Seeing Elizabeth from a distance, Jordan slipped away discreetly, leaving Ava behind. Elizabeth approached her husband with a forced smile. "I'm here," she said, desperate to maintain composure. "What's the plan?" Jordan gave a curt nod. "There's a closed-door session for the key players only. You'll have to wait outside." In the past, Elizabeth had always been included in these key player sessions as Jordan's partner and PR advisor. The subtle exclusion burned her pride. She swallowed her anger. "Sure, I can wait." After hours of waiting, she found Jordan and Ava laughing together near the bar. As she approached, Jordan's phone buzzed, and he stepped away. That was when Ava turned a chilling smirk on her face. "You know Jordan's a visionary," Ava said, swirling the wine in her glass. "He needs someone who can keep up with him on all levels: business, ambition, excitement." Elizabeth felt her face flush with anger. "I've been by his side for years. We built this together." Ava gave a theatrical shrug. "Maybe in the past. But times change. People evolve. I guess you were too comfortable." Elizabeth clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She was determined not to make a scene in front of such influential people. But oh, how she wanted to lash out, to expose Ava for the home wrecker she was. Ava flicked her hair behind her shoulder, noticing Elizabeth's agitation. "Things will be better if you accept it," she cooed, as if offering advice to a friend. Jordan's moved on in more ways than one. The finances are just the beginning. Elizabeth's body went cold. She realized in that moment how truly precarious her situation was. Ava was not simply a fling. She was positioning herself as a partner in Jordan's professional and personal life. The credit cards were just one step in what looked like a systematic campaign to push Elizabeth out of everything she and Jordan had built. Still, Elizabeth refused to crumble. She left the event quietly, but her mind churned with rage and heartbreak. It was time for her to take action. She needed to protect herself, her assets, and her dignity. Little did she know that as she plotted her next move, Jordan and Ava were preparing a financial ambush that would push her to the brink. Only fate and an unexpected intervention by a certain CEO would alter the course of their twisted game. In the days after the Los Angeles conference, Elizabeth attempted to consult with attorneys. She picked up a referral from a friend who once worked with a high-profile divorce lawyer in New York. The initial phone calls were sobering, with Jordan's empire being primarily under his name and her credit cards cancelled. She had limited liquidity to hire top-tier representation. Even so, Elizabeth pressed forward. She managed to scrape together some funds from a personal savings account. Jordan had no access to money she had set aside from her early PR consulting days. It wasn't a large sum, but enough to secure a preliminary consultation. During that consultation, her lawyer, Michelle Liu, a bright and empathetic but hard-hitting attorney based in Houston, laid out the hard truth. Financial abuse and infidelity are serious grounds for divorce, Michelle said, scanning through Elizabeth's financial statements. But if Jordan's funneling money and assets into new accounts under his own name, or shifting resources to places you can't see, we need proof, and we need it fast. Elizabeth swallowed. She recounted Ava's involvement, how she was effectively orchestrating the restructuring. Michelle's pen scribbled quickly over a notepad. "You have a right to half of the marital assets, Elizabeth, but it looks like your husband is 2 steps ahead. We must move quickly." The plan was to gather evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing and file a court order to freeze marital assets, ensuring Elizabeth had a fair shot. But as they began drafting documents and rummaging through what records, Elizabeth had an avalanche of shocking details surfaced. Jordan wasn't merely cancelling credit cards. He was transferring stocks from their joint portfolio into an account under his newly formed trust. He had changed the authorized signatory details for a few of their properties, effectively locking Elizabeth out. He was also taking out lines of credit against certain properties, presumably to fund new ventures that, as Elizabeth suspected, involved Ava. The emotional strain weighed heavily on Elizabeth. She couldn't sleep, her appetite waned. Each day felt like standing at the center of a storm. Yet if she thought this was the worst of it, she was mistaken. One evening, after finalizing some documents with Michelle, Elizabeth returned to her mansion to find her keycard didn't work on the electronic locks. Pounding on the door, she shouted for the live-in staff if any were left. Seconds later, the door opened slightly, revealing Ava's face. "Jordan's not here," Ava said icily. "You should call next time." Elizabeth's heart hammered. "This is my home. Get out of my way," she demanded, trying to push past. But Ava slid in front of her, refusing to budge. "He told me you're not welcome here anymore until the legal mess is settled." Ava sneered. "I have every right to ask you to leave." Elizabeth was trembling with fury. "You have no rights here. You're the mistress, not the wife." With a cold laugh, Ava stepped aside and pointed at Elizabeth's luggage haphazardly placed in the foyer. "Jordan left these for you," she said. "He said to pack whatever else you need and let security escort you out if you refuse to leave." Elizabeth blinked away tears, her throat raw with outrage. She was being thrown out of her own home by the woman who had intruded into her marriage. That moment was a cruel epiphany. Jordan had not only cut off her finances, but now he was physically pushing her out of the place she had shared with him for years. Yet in all that darkness, a sliver of light emerged the next morning. Elizabeth received a phone call from a close mutual friend, Marcus O'Donnell, who worked with Jordan at a large tech conglomerate in Dallas. Marcus was someone Elizabeth trusted, an executive who had known Jordan since the early days. He had seen them build the company from the ground up. Elizabeth Marcus said, his tone urgent. "I don't know everything that's going on, but I heard from your staff that you've been locked out. There's a board meeting next week. Jordan wants to finalize some big decisions. If you can get to that meeting and talk to the chairman, maybe you can find some leverage." Elizabeth's breath caught in her chest. The chairman of this particular conglomerate was none other than famed CEO David Hartridge, known not just for his visionary leadership, but also for a strict code of ethics. Over the years, Hartridge had invested heavily in Jordan's business. He was the reason Jordan sat on that board. He's not the type to meddle in personal affairs, Marcus warned. But if Jordan's pulling stunts that compromise your share in the company, Hartridge might step in. He's big on fairness and hates scandal. It was the glimmer of hope Elizabeth needed. She thanked Marcus profusely. The plan was simple: attend the board meeting, confront Jordan in front of Hartridge, and present enough evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing to ensure the board and possibly the entire conglomerate would not stand for it. She spent the week gathering documents, bank statements, and text message screenshots that implicated Jordan in unscrupulous financial moves. Michelle Liu helped compile everything into a neat folder. "You need to be prepared for Jordan to lash out," Michelle warned. "He'll try to discredit you in front of the board." Elizabeth nodded her determination, overshadowing her fear. She practiced her speech, reciting it in the mirror of her modest hotel room, where she had temporarily moved. Heart pounding, she told herself that if there was ever a time to fight, it was now. Finally, the day of the board meeting arrived. Elizabeth dressed in a sleek black pantsuit that radiated confidence. She walked into the corporate skyscraper in downtown Dallas, her chin held high despite the knot in her stomach. She spotted Jordan in the corridor, flanked by Ava and a couple of the board members. As soon as he saw Elizabeth, his expression darkened. "You're not supposed to be here," Jordan said, trying to keep his voice low. Elizabeth raised her chin. "I'm still an investor in your company. I hold shares. So yes, I'm attending the board meeting." Ava stepped in with a condescending smile. "Don't make a scene, Elizabeth. This meeting is for serious stakeholders." "I am a serious stakeholder," Elizabeth retorted, voice steady. "I'm your wife, still legally, and I'm half of this empire's foundation." Behind them, a tall figure approached CEO David Hartridge himself, a man in his 50s with graying temples and a firm handshake. He regarded Elizabeth with polite curiosity. "Ms. Alberts, I presume?" Elizabeth nodded, handing over her invitation papers and a letter from her attorney, which stated that she possessed partial shares. Hartridge studied the documents, then gave a curt nod indicating she was allowed to attend. Jordan shot Elizabeth a glare that spoke volumes. You have no idea what you're getting into. But Elizabeth did. She was here to preserve her dignity, her livelihood, and the legacy she had helped build. The meeting commenced in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline. The board members sat around a large mahogany table, exchanging pleasantries about the upcoming quarter's projections. Jordan made a short presentation on a new partnership with a logistics firm, highlighting expansions and new contracts. A few board members clapped. Then came time for open discussion. Elizabeth raised her hand, clearing her throat. "I'd like to address some concerns about the financial structuring Jordan is proposing." She began, her voice reverberating across the silent room. Jordan's face reddened. Ava, seated beside him, tried to intervene. "We should keep personal matters out of board discussions," she said. But Elizabeth pressed on, raising the folder of evidence. "These changes aren't just personal," Elizabeth said. "They could affect company stability. Jordan is funneling resources into a new trust, making questionable decisions without transparency. I have documents signed by him with references to Ms. Ava Monroe, demonstrating a conflict of interest that could potentially compromise investor trust." A hush fell over the room. Hartridge's brow creased. "Jordan, is this true?" Jordan stood, scrambling for composure. "This is a personal matter. Elizabeth is overstepping her bounds." "She's not." Hartridge replied, his voice sharp. "If there's a conflict of interest that threatens the stability of our partnership, it's very much a board matter." Jordan's eyes darted between Hartridge and Elizabeth. For the first time, he seemed cornered, uncertain how to proceed. Ava shot Elizabeth a lethal glare, realizing that Elizabeth's boldness had forced the topic into official territory. The tension was palpable. Elizabeth's heart thumped so loudly, she was certain everyone could hear it. But she stood her ground. Continuing. "I also discovered lines of credit being taken against marital properties to fund expansions. These expansions could be legitimate, but the details are obscured. I have reason to believe Ms. Monroe is manipulating these finances for her personal gain." Murmurs rippled through the board. A couple members exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who might have sided with Jordan seemed rattled by the magnitude of Elizabeth's accusations. Hartridge steepled his fingers, evaluating the situation. "I propose we recess for 15 minutes. Jordan, Elizabeth, Miss Monroe, please step into my office." Jordan inhaled frustration etched across his features, but he couldn't refuse the CEO's request, not without causing a catastrophic scene. The three followed Hartridge into a glass-walled corner office, shutting the door behind them. In that tense, enclosed space, the real battle began. Elizabeth laid out her evidence on the polished table before Hartridge. Jordan tried to dismiss it all as a personal dispute, but Hartridge was no fool. He could see the potential for scandal, especially if a partner was using company infrastructure for personal vendettas. Throughout this heated exchange, Ava attempted to deflect blame. She portrayed herself as a legal advisor, merely suggesting financial moves, disclaiming any wrongdoing. But Elizabeth's carefully compiled documents suggested otherwise. Emails, text messages, and proposed legal documents bore Ava's digital fingerprints. Hartridge's expression darkened. "Jordan, this is unacceptable. If these documents are authentic, you've put your personal entanglements ahead of corporate responsibility. I won't allow it under my leadership." Jordan's face went pale. He tried to protest, to label Elizabeth's claims as overblown, but Hartridge had already made up his mind. "Until this is sorted out, Jordan, I'm placing your proposals on hold. We can't move forward with any major financial changes if they're under this sort of ethical cloud." Elizabeth felt a surge of relief, a faint vindication. While she hadn't resolved the core issue of Jordan's betrayal, at least the board wasn't letting him run roughshod over her financial future. But Jordan, cornered and embarrassed, lashed out in desperation. "You can't shut me down like this," he snapped at Hartridge, voice tight with anger. "I'm the one who made that original deal with your conglomerate. You need my innovation." Hartridge stood up, bristling at Jordan's tone. "I'm the CEO, and you've just made me question your reliability and integrity. Watch yourself, Jordan." Ava stepped closer to Jordan, placing a hand on his arm to calm him, but he shrugged her off. "You'll regret this," he warned Hartridge, then turned to Elizabeth. "And you made a fool of me in front of everyone." Elizabeth clenched her fists, refusing to cower. "You did that to yourself," she said, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. Jordan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ava followed quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Hartridge sighed, looking at Elizabeth, who was holding back tears. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Hartridge said. "I'm sorry about your personal struggles, but I have to protect the board's interests. If you need anything, contact my office. I'm not a family court judge, but I won't let Jordan drag the company down." With that, Elizabeth let out a shaky breath. She had achieved a small but crucial victory, yet she couldn't shake the nagging sense that Jordan, humiliated and cornered, was far from finished. She left the skyscraper, stepping out into the bright Dallas sun, uncertain, but determined. Little did she know this chapter was only the start of a far more explosive confrontation, one that would involve security teams, sudden betrayals, and a twist that would bring Jordan himself to his knees. Life outside the mansion was lonely, but Elizabeth was thankful for the reprieve from Ava's manipulations. She rented a small apartment near downtown Austin and used what funds she had left to secure her basic needs, while Michelle continued to press for a financial freeze on Jordan's assets. In the weeks following the tense board meeting, Jordan went surprisingly quiet. No more legal letters arrived. No more credit lines were sabotaged. He didn't attempt to contact Elizabeth, nor did Ava. Instead, it seemed as though they had retreated into some silent fortress, likely strategizing their next move. Elizabeth took advantage of the lull. She reconnected with old friends and mentors, explaining partially at least what she was going through. While many were shocked, they offered support in the form of references, moral encouragement, and occasional leads for a stable job or a business partnership. Despite the heartbreak, Elizabeth discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a passive bystander in Jordan's world. She had her own capabilities, her own strengths. Slowly, she started consulting for small tech firms, using her communications and PR background to help them craft compelling pitches. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work that reminded her she could stand on her own 2 feet. Then one evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. A crisp, professional voice greeted her. "Hello, Elizabeth. This is Patricia Carlson. I'm an executive assistant at Tesla, working under Elon Musk's leadership team." Elizabeth's heart thudded. She had met Patricia briefly at a tech conference in Berlin 2 years ago, but they'd never exchanged more than pleasantries. "How can I help you?" Elizabeth asked, mind racing. Patricia hesitated. "I might have information relevant to your predicament with Jordan. Let's just say some of our legal divisions have been observing Ava Monroe for a while, and some red flags have come up." Red flags. Elizabeth's curiosity flared. "You're investigating her?" A slow exhale from the other end. "Our major concern is that she's potentially engaged in insider trading, or at least something that veers close to it. She's been known to manipulate powerful men to gain inside info on deals, especially around new technologies. We don't have direct evidence, but we do know that she's heavily involved in your husband's finances. We suspect she might be siphoning resources for her own agendas." Elizabeth's mind reeled. This was bigger than a domestic spat. Ava might be leveraging Jordan's resources and connections to stake her own claims in the tech world. That explained the sudden shifts in finances, the new trust accounts, and the lines of credit. Patricia continued. "We want to bring her down, but we need more information. You, Elizabeth, might be in a unique position to gather that." Elizabeth tapped her fingers on the kitchen counter. "Isn't that something your legal team handles?" A rueful laugh. "Yes, but we need Jordan's direct involvement. We suspect he's unwittingly giving her access to confidential materials through corporate crossovers or joint ventures. If you can help us prove it, we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, protect Tesla's proprietary data, and help you gain leverage in your divorce." Elizabeth considered the offer. It was risky. If Ava was truly up to something illegal, Elizabeth could expose herself to potential backlash, but the lure of finally getting the upper hand was strong. "I'll do what I can," Elizabeth replied cautiously. "But how do I communicate with you about this?" Patricia gave her a secure email address and instructions on how to encrypt files. "And one more thing," Patricia said, before hanging up. "People like Ava are cunning. She'll anticipate your every move. Don't trust phone lines or any device that Jordan has access to. Be careful." Elizabeth thanked her and ended the call. Adrenaline coursing through her. For the next few days, she scoured her digital archives for anything that might hint at insider information. Jordan's old messages about collaborations with major tech companies like Tesla or Amazon, documents that Ava might have manipulated anything that showed a trail of questionable activity. She found a few suspicious threads, forwarded emails from Jordan's corporate account that were CC'd to Ava's personal address. Attachments relating to Tesla's project Next Gen battery were among them, though none of this was strictly proof of wrongdoing yet. Elizabeth compiled what she could and sent them to the secure email Patricia provided. In response, Patricia confirmed that these were valuable leads, but incomplete. "Keep digging," she urged, "and let me know if you get direct evidence of deals or monetary gains tied to these inside details." Meanwhile, Michelle Elizabeth's lawyer was preparing for a preliminary hearing to freeze some of Jordan's assets. She insisted Elizabeth come to court to testify about the financial abuse and the suspicious activities they had uncovered. But Jordan's side surprised them by agreeing to a partial freeze without argument. "That's strange," Michelle said, tapping a pen against the conference table. "Why would he agree so easily?" Elizabeth shrugged, perplexed. "Maybe he realizes fighting me will look bad in front of the board." But Michelle wasn't convinced. "I suspect he's preparing a bigger move. Be vigilant. He may have more leverage than we know." The next morning, Elizabeth received an unsolicited text from Jordan. "We need to talk, face to face." She felt a swirl of conflicting emotions: anger, sorrow, curiosity. But she knew she had to tread carefully. She agreed to meet him in a public place, a cafe near the courthouse, where she could keep the upper hand. When Jordan arrived, he looked tired, as though the weight of his troubles had worn him down. He offered a half smile, which Elizabeth did not return. "Liz?" He began using the old nickname he once uttered, with affection. Things got out of hand. She crossed her arms. "You think—" He sighed, scanning her face for warmth that was no longer there. "I want to settle this amicably. We can discuss spousal support, property divisions, everything. No need for a long, nasty court battle." Elizabeth let the silence hover. She wasn't naive enough to believe him at face value. "Amicably? Are you telling me Ava is out of the picture?" Jordan's shoulders tensed. "This is about you and me, not her. Look, maybe I got carried away with Ava's advice. She's a brilliant attorney." "She's manipulative," Elizabeth cut in sharply. He brushed the point aside. "Regardless, I'm willing to compromise, but I need you to lay off this insider trading nonsense. It's reckless. You're endangering my reputation." Elizabeth realized then that Jordan knew she'd been snooping into his communications. Perhaps Tesla's legal inquiries had begun reverberating in his circle. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was worried, if not about losing her, then about losing his empire. "You made me the enemy," Elizabeth replied, in a hushed, trembling tone. "When you let your mistress cut off my cards and throw me out of my home." Jordan looked away, shame flickering on his face. "I didn't handle that well. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under with these deals." She waited, letting him squirm. Then he continued. "You'll get a fair share. I promise. I just need you to stop meddling in my professional affairs, especially with Tesla or any other major collaborators. You'll ruin me if you do." A bitter laugh escaped Elizabeth. She thought of all the times she had stood beside him, protecting him, representing him before powerful players, forging alliances that were crucial to his success. Now he was pleading for her, not to ruin him. The irony nearly choked her. Before she could respond, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and muttered a soft curse. "I have to go," he said, throwing some cash on the table for their untouched coffees. Elizabeth watched him leave, a mixture of pity and disdain swirling in her stomach. It was obvious he was desperate, but was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or a ploy to keep her from uncovering more incriminating information about Ava? That question lingered as she returned to her apartment, drained. However, a new email from Patricia waited in her inbox. It contained an attachment, a partial timeline of suspicious trades linked to accounts rumored to be controlled by Ava Monroe. There were large bets placed on Tesla's stock ahead of public announcements. Gains in the tens of millions. This is huge, Elizabeth thought. If she connected these trades to emails or calls between Jordan and Ava, it could be the smoking gun. And while Elizabeth had no intention of going to the feds on her own, Tesla's legal team could bury Ava, and by extension, Jordan's complicity, if he was involved. Elizabeth clutched her phone, anxiety coursing through her. She was walking a razor's edge. One false step, and Jordan might retaliate more fiercely, or Ava might strike. But a successful strike against Ava could free Elizabeth from this entire ordeal, giving her the leverage to secure a fair divorce settlement, or even land Jordan in deeper trouble, depending on his role. She reached for her phone to text Patricia when it buzzed in her hand. A call from an unknown number again. Tentatively, Elizabeth answered. A man's voice greeted her, calm and steady. "Hello, Ms. Alberts. My name is Gregory Shaw. I'm part of CEO David Hartridge's legal counsel. He asked me to follow up regarding the situation with your husband." Elizabeth's heart skipped. Hartridge's legal counsel. "We understand from Mr. Hartridge's conversation with you that there might be unethical or even illegal behavior in play," Gregory continued. "The board is concerned about potential liability if Jordan's personal dealings spill into our corporate structure. We can't risk another scandal. Mr. Hartridge would like to assist you discreetly." Elizabeth exhaled slowly. She was on the cusp of powerful alliances forming against Jordan and Ava, but the more people got involved, the more dangerous it felt. Gregory concluded, "We'll be in touch with your lawyer. If you have any crucial evidence, Mr. Hartridge suggests you keep it secure. He wants to avoid a public meltdown, but he's prepared to do what's necessary to protect the company's interests, and that includes supporting you in your legal disputes, if it comes to that." Hanging up. Elizabeth felt a measure of validation. The cracks in Jordan's seemingly untouchable world were growing. Perhaps justice would prevail. Yet as she prepared to finalize the next round of documents for Michelle, a gnawing worry kept her awake at night. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, and Jordan, though once gentle and loving, had shown he could be ruthless when threatened. She braced herself for the storm that was surely coming. The next time Elizabeth saw Jordan in person, it wasn't by chance or a carefully arranged meeting. It was at the headquarters of Hartridge's conglomerate in Dallas. A sudden emergency board session had been called to address urgent corporate matters, and Elizabeth, having been notified by Gregory Shaw, arrived prepared. She walked into the reception area, her heart pounding with anticipation. Michelle Liu had insisted on accompanying her, but at the last minute she was called to handle a crucial filing. Elizabeth went alone, relying on the moral support from Gregory and the knowledge that Hartridge wanted the truth on record. Jordan was already inside the boardroom with Ava, who paced like a clad tiger. When Elizabeth entered, they both snapped their heads in her direction. Ava's glare could have sliced glass. Jordan's face was inscrutable, tense, angry, but also tinged with fear. Hartridge arrived moments later, trailed by a few board members and legal advisors. He wasted no time in stating the purpose of the meeting. Allegations have come to my attention that Ms. Monroe has been engaging in stock trades leveraging proprietary information from Jordan's company and potentially from our own collaborations. We need to clarify the truth. Now. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Ava's jaw clenched. "This is preposterous," she began. "We demand to see your proof." Hartridge nodded to one of his advisors, who distributed printed documents, timelines of suspicious trades, tied to accounts flagged by Tesla's legal team, along with correspondences that Elizabeth and Patricia had pieced together. Jordan snatched a packet from the advisor. His eyes swept over the page's color, draining from his face. Ava's lips thinned, and for a moment Elizabeth could see the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. Hartridge pinned them with a stern gaze. "Jordan, you've been a valuable partner. I don't want to see your personal life derail your professional standing, but this is bigger than your marriage. Insider trading is a federal crime, and if Ms. Monroe is using your business resources to pull this off, you're implicated." Ava recovered quickly. She placed a hand on Jordan's arm, her voice smooth. "This is a misunderstanding, David. Anyone can align stock trades with corporate announcements. It's called speculation." Elizabeth decided enough was enough. She stood. "Speculation is one thing, but forwarding private emails, entire business proposals, and preliminary press releases is not speculation. I've seen the messages. You're literally discussing the best times to execute trades based on announcements that hadn't been made public yet." Ava whirled on Elizabeth. "You have no legal standing to claim that. You're just a scorned wife trying to sabotage Jordan and me." Elizabeth's blood boiled. "We'll let the evidence speak. There are even time-stamped emails from Jordan's corporate account sent to your personal email, Ms. Monroe, discussing upcoming expansions and product launches. Then trades were executed in your name or trusts linked to you within hours." A hush followed. Jordan's hands shook slightly. He seemed torn between denial and guilt. After all, the evidence was damning. If he denied it outright, he'd appear foolish. But if he admitted his involvement, he risked criminal charges and the wrath of the board. Hartridge leaned forward, his voice firm. "Jordan, I need answers." "Were you aware of these trades?" Jordan stared at the table, words refusing to form. Finally, he managed, Ava said it was all above board, that it was just normal investing. Ava let out a short laugh, but it sounded hollow. "If you want to scapegoat me, Jordan, think carefully," she warned. "We made certain deals in your name as well. Your signatures are on plenty of documents." The entire boardroom seemed to hold its breath. Hartridge addressed one of his legal advisors. "Have we sent this to the SEC?" "Not yet," the advisor responded. "We wanted to confront them first." Jordan shot to his feet, panic etched on his face. "No need to escalate it. We can handle this internally. If I undo the trades, repay any gains, repay tens of millions of dollars, Hartridge asked. And that would just be the tip of the iceberg if the SEC digs deeper. This is out of our hands if they launch a formal investigation. Elizabeth watched Jordan unravel. This was the man who had once been so composed, so unstoppable. Now he was cornered, sweat beading on his forehead. Ava, too, looked like a wild animal backed into a corner, eyes darting around the room. At that moment, a building security guard appeared at the door, knocking softly. "Mr. Hartridge, you asked for security on standby," he announced quietly. "Thank you," Hartridge replied, his tone like steel. "I believe we might need you." Ava's eyes flitted towards the door, then back to Hartridge. She adopted a pleading tone. "David, you know me. I've handled legal matters for some of the biggest players in the industry. I would never do anything to jeopardize your trust." Hartridge's face remained stony. "I trusted Jordan, not you. And this evidence suggests you're at the center of a major ethical breach. If you don't have a verifiable explanation for each of these trades and how you obtained insider information, I have no choice but to protect the company from liability." Suddenly, Jordan snapped. Fear twisted into anger, and he pointed a trembling finger at Elizabeth. "You did this. You ruined everything because you couldn't handle that I moved on." Elizabeth steadied her breathing, preparing to reply. But Hartridge cut in calm yet firm. "Don't blame her for your poor decisions. You let your personal affair become a corporate liability." Something in Jordan cracked. He lunged toward Elizabeth as if to grab her documents or her phone, an irrational move likely spurred by desperation. But he never made contact. In a blink, the security guard stepped forward and intercepted Jordan, gripping his arms. "Stand down, sir," the guard said, voice authoritative. Jordan struggled, but the guard was a solid wall of muscle. Ava shrieked. "Let him go." "This is a private matter." Hartridge shook his head, anger coloring his features. "You just attempted to assault someone in my boardroom. Security remove Mr. Alberts from the premises." Jordan's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't do that. I'm on the board." "Not anymore," Hartridge said grimly. "I can and I will. You're suspended pending an internal investigation. Once that concludes, we'll determine your status. Now go and take Ms. Monroe with you." A second guard stepped in, guiding Ava toward the door as she protested threatening lawsuits and defamation claims. But her words rang hollow, overshadowed by the looming specter of an SEC investigation. Elizabeth stood off to the side, stunned by how quickly it had escalated from a tension-filled meeting to an outright meltdown. As Jordan and Ava were led out, Jordan craned his neck to shout at her, "You'll pay for this, Elizabeth. Don't think you've won." But the threat carried little weight now. In that moment, Elizabeth felt the mixture of triumph and sorrow that comes with toppling a man she once loved. She hadn't wanted to see Jordan destroyed, only to protect herself and the life they had built together. But Jordan's actions and Ava's ambition had forced her hand. Hartridge dismissed the board members, soon after instructing his legal team to cooperate fully with any investigations. He turned to Elizabeth with a sympathetic frown. "I'm sorry you had to endure this, Ms. Alberts. I assure you we'll handle it lawfully. Whatever personal or marital disputes remain, I hope you find closure." Elizabeth gave him a small nod. "Thank you. I appreciate your fairness." She gathered her documents and left the skyscraper, the bright Texas sun striking her face as she stepped onto the street. The entire drama replayed in her mind. "He let his mistress cut off my cards, but the CEO called security on him. She thought a bitter yet satisfying sense of irony spreading in her chest. She wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Legal battles would continue, depositions would be taken, and the divorce was far from final. But in this pivotal moment, she had taken back her power, standing against the storm that Jordan and Ava had unleashed. And for the first time in months, Elizabeth felt a glimmer of hope that she might in the end be free from their tyranny. In the weeks that followed, word spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up on rumors of insider trading linked to a high-profile tech investor, hinting that a major name was under investigation. It didn't take long for the rumor mill to connect the dots to Jordan Alberts and his mysterious attorney-turned-partner, Ava Monroe. Elizabeth watched from the sidelines, inundated with calls and messages from acquaintances, reporters, and sometimes even old college classmates she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored most of them, preferring to let the legal process unfold without adding fuel to the media frenzy. Jordan, under immense legal and financial pressure, attempted to strike a deal if Elizabeth agreed to keep quiet and not testify against him or Ava. Regarding insider trading, he would give her a generous divorce settlement. The settlement included alimony, a hefty lump sum, and properties that would secure her financial future. However, Elizabeth refused any agreement that required her to lie or withhold the truth if subpoenaed. Nonetheless, she allowed her lawyer Michelle to work out a fair settlement that didn't involve perjury. Eventually, Jordan capitulated, realizing he had to salvage what he could from the marriage and business meltdown. The final settlement granted Elizabeth a significant portion of the assets, the mansion by Lake Travis, ironically, and a sizable share of Jordan's original tech startup. Meanwhile, Ava disappeared from the public eye, her reputation in tatters. Rumors surfaced that she'd fled the country perhaps to avoid legal repercussions, while others suggested she was hiding out in some luxury villa, waiting for the storm to pass. Either way, her days of meddling in Jordan's finances seemed to be over. Elizabeth didn't celebrate Jordan's downfall. She quietly grieved the end of a marriage that had started in love and partnership, yet she also felt relief and a renewed sense of self. She returned to the Lake Travis mansion, deciding whether to keep it or sell. The sweeping views of the water brought back memories, some of which felt like knives to her heart, others that warmed her soul. She began a new chapter in her life, leveraging her PR skills to start a consultancy focused on helping women entrepreneurs navigate both business and personal challenges. She named it Phoenix Rose Consulting, symbolizing rebirth and resilience. To her surprise, she found more joy in championing other women than she ever did, standing behind Jordan at glitzy galas. She kept in touch with Patricia from Tesla, who occasionally updated her on the ongoing investigations. Whether Jordan faced criminal charges depended on further evidence. But at least for Elizabeth, the immediate threat to her assets and well-being had lifted. David Hartridge reached out, once inviting Elizabeth to a dinner with the board, presumably to mend fences. Elizabeth politely declined. She had no desire to relive the tension of board meetings or navigate corporate politics, where her personal life became public fodder. She was grateful for Hartridge's stance, but preferred to build her future away from the chaos. In moments of solitude, Elizabeth reflected on the entire ordeal. She'd once believed that love, loyalty, and shared ambition could conquer anything. Yet she also realized that unchecked power and ego could corrode even the strongest of bonds. Jordan's betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it set her free to discover her own strengths and a life not tethered to someone else's rising star. Yes, heartbreak lingered, and healing was an ongoing process, But Elizabeth found herself waking each day with a sense of purpose. She'd gather with female founders at local co-working spaces, host workshops on media relations, and offer moral support to those feeling overshadowed by bigger players. Each time she saw a spark of confidence ignite in another woman's eyes, she felt her own sense of wholeness return. In time, Elizabeth would finalize the divorce, sign the deeds, and officially start over. A sense of calm settled within her, like the slow, tranquil waves on Lake Travis at dawn. Her story, the humiliating card cancellations, the public meltdown, the mistress's meddling, would become a cautionary tale, one she shared sparingly, only when it might help others. Despite the scars, Elizabeth refused to let bitterness define her. She chose growth empathy and a belief that with the right support, anyone can rise from the ashes more formidable than before. Just as Elizabeth thought she had reached stable ground, fate tossed her another curveball. A month after the settlement, Michelle called her urgently. "The feds want to depose you," she said. "They uncovered new evidence Jordan may be involved in deeper crimes, bribery, money laundering. Ava might have orchestrated a network." Elizabeth's stomach dropped. Jordan never mentioned anything like that. "They've found offshore transactions and documents with his signature," Michelle said grimly. 2 days later, Elizabeth sat in a stark federal office, flanked by Michelle and 2 serious agents. They questioned her about Jordan's finances, Ava's role, the card cancellations, and philanthropic events that may have masked backdoor deals. Elizabeth stuck to the facts. She neither speculated nor dramatized. One agent, impressed, said, "You've been very helpful, Ms. Alberts. This case is significant." She left emotionally drained but relieved. She hadn't been dragged down with Jordan, but the storm wasn't over. Whispers followed Jordan was hiding at a secluded ranch, dodging the press. Ava had vanished. More subpoenas were issued. An indictment loomed. Elizabeth stayed focused on her consultancy, channeling stress into helping other women navigate business pitfalls. Her story, once painful, became a symbol of warning and strength. Then came the headlines: Jordan Alberts indicted for insider trading, fraud, and obstruction. Ava was named but still missing. The scandal rocked the tech world. Elizabeth issued a single statement. "I'm saddened by Jordan's choices. I've cooperated fully with authorities and continue to rebuild my life." Eventually, Jordan pled guilty to a lesser charge, offering a tearful courtroom apology. Elizabeth watched from home, tears in her eyes, not from triumph, but quiet grief for the man she once loved. Still, she understood consequences had to follow actions. That night, beneath the soft moonlight over Lake Travis, Elizabeth allowed herself one last cry for the past that died and the hope still waiting ahead. Life has a way of testing our fortitude when we least expect it. Elizabeth Alberts began this journey as a devoted wife, only to see her world upended by betrayal and financial sabotage. Yet what she lost in illusions, she gained in unbreakable resilience. Standing up to powerful forces and calling out wrongdoing isn't easy, but it's sometimes the only way to protect your dignity and your future.